Hi friends, Jane here, and it has been a really long time since I've done a recent reads video. I need to do more of them frequently. Maybe I need to go back to monthly wrap-ups. I just am so inconsistent in my reading that it's hard to, some months I have 6 books, some months I have 20 books. Anyway, we're doing a recent reads because there has been a lot. A lot of this is manga and graphic novels, but I still want to talk about all the good reading with you.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soul spoken.
So I'm going to start with the only DNF in this pile, and this DNF sadly was one of the books on my 5-star predictions list, and that is No Bones About It. So No Bones About It is, there's a guy, he's an archivist, and he is translating a German grimoire into English when this skeletal guy comes in, steals it. You know, when they report it to the police are like, is that really what happened? But there is somebody there who knows that paranormal stuff exists and sends him to a detective who is a psychic and who has a werewolf sidekick. This seems like it would be right up my alley, and it could be up other people's alleys. But it just was a miss for me. So I think the things that really did it, number one, I was expecting more of a mystery with the psychic and the werewolf as the detectives. And I'm sure that probably is what happened, but it just felt there's too much fantasy in what I wanted to be a mystery. So I was struggling there. I was struggling because the werewolf and psychic, their relationship bond was kind of weird. I wasn't connecting with them. And this book is also told in an omniscient perspective, and that is a perspective that I often don't jive well with. And I was trying. I got 25, 30 pages in, and I just it wasn't working for me. And a lot of times I'll let a book go further, but I just knew in my bones that this book wasn't one that was going to be for me. Now, it could definitely be for you. I'm passing this on to a friend who I think is going to love it. She is much more a fantasy reader than I am, and I think if you really enjoy fantasy, you'll probably enjoy this more than I do. I'm really super picky about fantasy, and I think this was just not what I was expecting it to be, and I wasn't particularly interested in what it was. Not a bad book, just not for me. The next book was a graphic novel, The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. It is about a girl whose father has died, and it is a society where sons inherit. So in order to inherit her father's stuff, she has to either get married and give it to a man, but she's a lesbian, so she's not into that, or she has to portray herself as a man. So she does. She portrays herself as a man, and she goes to a different town than the one she grew up in, and I think she's a duke or some lord or something. She's important. And she meets the princess. And the princess, thinks he's a hot dude and she likes him, and they kind of start falling in love. But obviously, the problem is the princess doesn't know that he is not a duke, or she is not a duke. So I loved that everything was in color. I have a really hard time with graphic novels that are not in color because I can't always tell who's who. I enjoyed the story. I thought there were some really important conversations that were had. I did think there were some important conversations that maybe weren't had, but it is a teen graphic novel, so maybe those conversations didn't need to be had. I thought the fantasy world was fun. I definitely think this is fairy tale-esque. It's not necessarily set in a specific time period, and there's quite a bit of modern stuff, but also historical vibes. So I had a really good time with this. Again, it's for teens, so your mileage may vary, but I liked it. The next book I read, I don't have a physical copy of, I read as an audiobook, and that was Ice Planet Barbarians. This book was a journey. So, I really liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It is about a girl, I cannot remember her name now because it's been a while, who she is abducted by aliens, and the aliens ship without the aliens, they have to drop her and the other girls that they've abducted onto this ice planet. And she has kind of gone out to scout and be the one who is trying to like save lives, because they are on a nice planet. They're running out of resources. People are hurt. People are sick. It's a hot mess. And she meets this guy, and he basically realizes that that is his fated mate. It's a really cool take on fated mates. So he is like, sure, whatever you need. They don't speak the same language, but there's a lot of like, they get the point across. and so things, then he's like, all that, I am going to do anything that she needs to take care of her, and we're going to find a way to fall in love, and it's going to be great. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It could have been a 5 out of 5, but everything that happened, not everything, some significant stuff happened before they got dropped on this ice planet. And I hated very much the beginning to the point I almost DNF'd it. It was some really trigger warny stuff. And the thing is, like, I don't really have a lot of triggers, but I felt it was unnecessary, and it just kind of gave me an ick because, I know what this kind of book is. I'm here for the sweet romance, the spicy stuff. The stuff that was happening in the beginning wasn't that. I will also say this book was not as spicy as I expected. I know there's a lot of books in the series, so maybe it gets spicier, but other than that first little bit of the book, I loved it. If that first bit had been different, it could have been a 5-star, but it was so bad. Bad is not the right word. It was so not for me. Didn't work for me the first 45 minutes or so of this audiobook that I just couldn't give it above a 4, even though everything that came after was just so good. So good. All right, the next book was my favorite in this section that we're talking about. I'm just going to be honest. It was on my 5-star predictions. It was a recommendation from my friend, and oh my gosh, I just loved it. And that was Wolf Gone Wild. So, in this, we have Evie and Mateo. And Mateo is a werewolf, and he has not been able to shift because they think he has a hex on him. And so he's gone to Evie, who's a hex breaker, and they're trying to figure out like how to release his werewolf. And she and him like fall in love, and it's beautiful. And she is nerdy and into comic books, and he's a sculptor, and this was just so good. There is one intimate scene that was just a little bit close to my border of comfort. I'm not a prude. I definitely don't consider myself prudish, but there are certain things that work for me and certain things that don't. And this was like just on that border of, I was like, yeah, I'm still here for this, but like barely. But there is one hot scene in this, and it's good. There's a lot of lusting, and that kind of at times got annoying. Also, this is a very conversational way to write the story, and initially I didn't vibe very well with the writing itself because it's just so casual. It's just like what Mateo and Evie are thinking in that moment. I will tell you, slight spoiler for my world, I am reading the second one. I don't love it as well as I love this one, because this one was a 5-star. Like, I loved this. I want to read it again and again and again, but like for the first time. And also, I will also say, if you have other paranormal books that are like this vibe, this is how I want my paranormals, because I have so much trouble finding paranormals, especially werewolf stuff that I love. This was so good. This is everything I want in my paranormals. Why can't we have more of this? But anyway, the second book is good. It's not quite as good. As I was reading this, I mentioned it to 2 of my friends. I was like, this is so good. And one picked it up. So we're buddy reading the second one. And they read the first one. or he read the first one and really enjoyed it, and so was willing to buddy read the second with me. So it was cool because while this is a romance, there's a lot of other stuff going on. So it's not just a romance. So he's not a romance reader. This was his first romance, and he's going to finish the series with me, I think. So I'm excited. He's a fellow author too. So he was really doing some research with this, but still, it was great. It was fun. I loved this. And it was so far my only 5-star prediction of the ones I've read. That was a 5-star. But yay me. All right. So the next one is a manga. It is Ascendance of a Bookworm, Volume 1. This book is complicated to explain what it is, and I think this series is going to be a 5-star series. I think I'm going to love the series. This one was... I ended up giving it a 4 because I didn't quite think it was a 5, but it could have been a 5 type thing. I think the series is going to be a 5. So this girl, she is a major bookworm, and she is killed by a stack of books falling on her. Like, this is the first couple pages that this happened. And she wakes up, and she's been... I wouldn't really call it reincarnated because she's not a baby, but she's in the body of this girl. And she's like, it's fine. If there's books in this world, I don't care. I'll just read books. But there aren't really books in this world, or at least that she has access to. Her family is very poor, and the little girl whose body that she is in has been very sick for a long time. So she has a mom and a dad and a sister who kind of take care of her, but she's very weak, she's very small, and she just wants all the books, and she just can't have the books because there's not really an abundance of them in this world, and she's basically trying to sort out how to make books happen in this world. It's a cute concept. I really like a lot of it. It is in black and white, which for me can sometimes make it hard to follow. I didn't have too hard a time, but I did have a couple times where I was like, wait, is this person or this person? For me, I think my biggest issue is the main character is kind of annoying. So I really like the idea of what's going on, and sometimes like she's book obsessed and I love that, but occasionally she just like crosses that border to you're kind of annoying and I don't really like you that well. So overall I like it, but it was definitely just like times that it crossed into to annoying, and I was frustrated with her, and I was like, okay, so I really can't give this a 5, but I think like I want to keep reading, and I think the whole thing as a compilation, accumulation, all the things, once it's all together, it's going to be a 5, I think, for me. Just this particular one wasn't. Okay, so the next one is one I do not have a physical copy of. It's another audiobook I did, and it is Death in Salem. This is book 4 in the Will Reese mystery series, and Will Reese is a weaver who solves mysteries during the Revolutionary War. It was solid. I gave it a 4 out of 5. My favorite in the series was still the third book, so this one I didn't like quite as much as the last one. I think a big part of it is in the last one we really got a lot of family dynamics, and in this one that's a little less. His wife, who sometimes does mystery solving with him, she was there but not at the beginning, so it was a little bit more of a I should back up and tell you what it's about, right? Okay, so Will is in Salem doing weaving stuff and trying to pick up some fabrics, and he runs into an old friend. The old friend is an undertaker, and shortly after his arrival there, the undertaker's girlfriend is accused of murder, and so his friend is like, Will, you've got to prove that she didn't do it, because she didn't. So Will's like, okay, because he had solved mysteries during the Revolutionary War. So he goes to try to help prove that this guy's girlfriend didn't do it, she didn't, and to like solve what happened. I loved the side characters, a lot of them. There were some really good conversations about the roles of women in history and, women not typically being given businesses and property and things like that. So I really loved a lot of those things. I did have some issues in general with the mystery itself. I didn't find the ending not satisfying. It wasn't that. I didn't feel like I was given enough information that I could guess who it was. I like it when we are given the information and been like, oh, yeah, how did I miss that? That wasn't how I felt about this at all. I felt like, oh, okay. But still a solid mystery series in general. If you like historical mysteries, I enjoy the series so much. I do think that this is good. It's just not great, and it was a 4-star for me. Okay, the next book I have is another manga. I read Creepy Cat. So, I don't really understand what this is about, which tends to be a theme for me with manga. A girl moves into a house, there's a creepy cat. That's what I understand. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 4 or 3 out of 5. It's got some funny moments. It's got a really creepy atmosphere. It's got decent art. It is in like a semi-color, so it's not like the bright colors, but like I knew what everything was and what was going on. It wasn't bad. I just didn't get a lot of it. And that's kind of a theme for me with manga. And generally, if I don't get it, but can't tell you what is wrong with it, I just give it a 3-star because it's probably a very good book. And I don't think it was doing anything wrong. I think I just am still learning how to read manga. So, was not a hit, but had a cool aesthetic. The next manga, which was a hit, and which I gave a 4-star to, was Cat and Gamer. So this is about a girl who is socially awkward, maybe on the spectrum, and she finds a cat. And she brings him home and adopts him, even though she's clearly never had a cat before, and humor ensues. This was so fun and just so adorable, and I just had a really good time reading it. So I am planning on continuing this series because I just had a good time, and there was so many cat antics, and I understood most of what was going on because this was just having a cat, and cats are weird, and they are, and I loved it. Okay. The next book was on my 5-star predictions. It was not a 5-star, but it was a 4-star, and that is Dead Poets Society. So, Dead Poets Society is my absolute favorite movie ever. I've not done a rewatch since Robin Williams passed away. I probably need to do that. But I will tell you, this is a movie to book adaptation, not a book to movie adaptation. And I didn't know that when I first got it. And I definitely do think that detracted a little bit from my enjoyment of the book because this book is almost entirely a play-by-play of the movie. You get a little added character development, which I appreciated, and it was fine. It didn't do anything super spectacular. I think there was maybe 2 scenes in the book that are not in the movie, and then a few conversations that really stuck out to me where I was like, oh, that was a really cool ad. That was a really cool thing to help us better understand this character. But I also do not think that this had the power or impact of the movie, and that may be biasness. I also felt, especially in the beginning, that it was a little confusing if you haven't seen the movie. I think if you've seen the movie and you read the book, it won't be a waste of your time. There's a couple good things to get out of it, and obviously the plot's great, the characters are great. It didn't wow me the way I wanted it to wow me. And the way I think if I was reading a book that was the actual source material for the Dead Poets Society. And I'm assuming there is no source material. It probably was just a movie that somebody made. But had I been reading actual Dead Poets Society source material to really dig into the teacher and his past and the students and their past and their relationships and all the stuff, I could have really loved that. I just want more in this world and explanation and understanding. And we got a smidgen, but not a lot. It was fine. It was fine. It was solid 4, but it didn't wow me the way I wanted it to. The next book was another of my audiobook listens to. It was the next in the Poirot series. I am doing a read through of the Poirot series, and I just finished 3-Act Tragedy. So, 3-Act Tragedy is about Poirot is at a dinner party, and there is a death at this dinner party, and they don't initially, including him, suspect it was murder. It seems like an old man had a sickness. Then, sometime later, there was another sickness or situation, and at a dinner party that had a lot of overlapping people, and the person died. And so Poirot is like called in and told about it, and he's like, yes, that does seem rather suspicious. So then at that point, he starts helping to investigate. I gave this a 4 out of 5. It is not my favorite Poirot. I would say for me, it's kind of high mid. So I understood what was going on, which I don't always with Poirot. Sometimes do. Like, sometimes there's too many characters. Sometimes the plot gets a little muddled. So there's definitely some Poirots I have not vibed with at all. And this one I genuinely liked. I just thought there wasn't enough Poirot. So the problem with this book is that Poirot is almost a secondary character because there's this guy who is investigating the murder. He was at the first dinner party, and then the second dinner party he wasn't at, but like he knew the guy. And so he is very invested in this. And he was the one who in the first dinner party was like, I think this might be a murder. Something is happening. So anyway, him and Poirot is kind of letting him investigate because the dude is trying to show off to attract a woman that he likes. And the girl likes him and he likes her, and they want to be together, but like there's a lot of like, oh, I'm older than her, she won't like me, and oh, a man like him would never want anything to do with me, I'm just a young thing, and fresh and don't know nothing about the world, and how could a man as worldly as that possibly want me? So anyway, Poirot's kind of like trying to step back and let him do his detectiving thing while looking nice for this young lady. So I really thought there was not nearly enough Poirot in this book. And I will also say I guessed pretty early on parts of maybe not exactly, but like I was in the ballpark of who the killer situation was. Solving the mystery. I had a pretty good idea, and I wasn't quite right, but I was like just adjacent to it. I do think that it did really fun, cool stuff, but I think sometimes Christie does really fun, cool stuff too close together, and then when you've read it, if you've read other Christies, like it doesn't have as much bang. And I will say I felt that way about this book. Like, she did stuff that if this was the first time I'd read a Christie, I'd been like, oh. And there were moments that I did kind of feel like, oh, she's doing this, huh? But it also sometimes feels like she's trying so hard to be different and cool, and I appreciate that, but then sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, I can see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. It's cool, but we don't have to do that. So I felt that way kind of about this book. Like, we just come off of a couple others that had cool things, unexpected things, unexpected reveals. And I know that's kind of like why you're in a mystery, but sometimes I just want a nice solid mystery. I want to go back to, the first couple books where it wasn't anything that was twisty or complicated. It was just, here's the situation, we're solving it. So again, this was good. It was 4 out of 5, but it just didn't have enough Poirot. It did really cool, fun stuff, but because I'm reading so many Poirots right in a row, I'm kind of like seeing it before it happens. And, I read a lot in the mystery genre, so I was like, oh, okay. It's not my favorite, but it definitely was like in the high middle. High middle, right along with like the first two books. I would say it was a little bit above Murder in the Lynx and probably a little bit above the very first book. A Ferret Styles. Just slightly above that in my categorization. So it was definitely below Peril at End House, below Black Coffee, below Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and Everything in the World is above the Big Four and Murder on the Blue Train. And then, yeah, so I'm enjoying Poirot. I love the Poirot series. I miss Hastings. We needed more Hastings. Why did they cut Hastings out so fast? But yeah, this was fine. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't bad. All right, the last book on this list was another of my 5-star predictions. And like Dead Poet Society, it was good, but it just didn't quite hit 5-star ranking for me. And that was I'll Be There for You. This was a good, solid 4 stars. This is about a girl, what is her name? Ray, who her father passed away a year ago in a car accident. And she is still really stuck in her grief. And because of circumstances, she ends up trying out for a play and getting into the play and really becoming very good friends with the other theater kids. I love theater, and so all the theater stuff I absolutely loved. I loved the exploration of grief. This book had me crying so much. Like, chapter 1 I cried, chapter 2 I cried. Like, there was so much crying with this book. Just the dealing with the grief that she and her mom were going through. I loved also some of the looks at grief that we don't normally get. One of the things Ray has struggled with is a lot of her friends kind of are tired of the grief show. They're not wanting to be friends and hang out because all you do is be sad. And she is still very much fully in grief for her father and is just not really in a party mood. And I thought that was a beautiful thing, especially with high schoolers. They've not dealt with those losses yet, and they don't understand that healing takes time. There were a couple things that didn't work for me. One is the situation with Mac. So, I don't want to give anything away, but Mac is a guy that she becomes very close to, and we as the reader kind of feel like we're being set up for a romantic situation, and then it's explained to us why that's not going to work. And that's kind of on the back cover, so I don't think that's a big spoiler. It says, when Ray meets Mac, a boy with a charming smile who thinks any problem can be solved with a show tune, she cautiously welcomes their easy banter. With his humor, enthusiasm, and well-curated Broadway playlist, Mac slowly edges his way into her heart. But when he proves every rose has its thorns, Ray thinks about withdrawing to the comfort of hair metal and the silver screen. So, like, the thing that kind of bothered me about this situation is it is Mac who is ultimately the one who says this isn't going to work for very good, valid reasons. But it felt kind of to me like he was leading her on. And I do kind of understand maybe why, but then she ends up with a different person, and that person we just didn't, for me, have enough reason to want them together. It's and as a matter of fact, it was like, oh, we go from this relationship that I'm really rooting for, and these people who seem like they could really be a cute, wonderful couple that really understand each other and have really great communication and chemistry and just stuff, to this guy who I was like, she's with the annoying guy. And like, he's done a couple things to show us that he's a really sweet guy. The guy that she ends up with, I can't remember his name. I want to say it's I don't want to spoil that either. So anyway, but like I felt like I wasn't there for that. I felt like there wasn't enough setup for her to get with him and for me not to feel let down being like, but I get it, but Mac. But like you have to give me a guy who's at least as good as Mac. And this guy he's fine, but I just couldn't root for him. But I loved all the friendship in this. I loved the theater stuff. I loved the exploration of grief. I love her own feelings of like, if things had been different, I'm responsible because of something that obviously clearly did not lead to her dad having a car accident, but like we all feel those things when somebody we love dies. Like, could I have done something different? So I loved all of those things. I love that they make a project out of like a pay it forward and try to do kind things. And that was just a fun exploration. I really did have a good time with this book, but just the relational stuff I didn't care for. Also, she and her mom have a really angry relationship, and there's good reasons why, but just at times I was really frustrated because I was like, I really like you, Ray, or I'm trying to really like you, but then you go and act like that with your mom, and I just want to be like, ma'am, that is not what we do. And also, like, I'm a mom of teenagers, and so sometimes the things Ray did, I was like, girl, I get it, you're a teenager and you're dumb, but please stop being a dumb teenager. So, yeah, 4-star, it was good. There were a couple things that just didn't quite work for me, that I couldn't quite put it at 5 stars. So, those are all the recent reads I've had. Please tell me if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. Also, tell me what book you read this month that was like your top and your bottom. What was your best read and what was a read that just didn't quite hit it for you? All right, guys, this has been Jane. I'll see you next time.